Having been released for 12 years, Terraria has garnered an audience into the millions and has become renowned for its riveting 2D combat, exploration, and sandbox element. But one thing it never gained notoriety for was its story. This actually shouldn't come as a surprise to you all, because the game was never made with that intent. In fact, the lore wasn't even publicly revealed until Terraria's 8-year anniversary, when Relogic's community manager SafeMonda made a public post on the community forums, which gave us a few pages of the story. However, as a man who has graduated with a degree in Dark Souls lore analogy, I began to realize that the story has a lot of room for improvement and to be fleshed out to a much greater extent than it has been. So today I've decided to look deep into the story of Terraria and find ways to improve or add on to the story that Relogic is trying to tell. I'll be separating these into sections in order to structure this video coherently, so without further ado, let's jump straight into this. In Terraria's beginning, it stated that the gods established a balance to guarantee fairness for all living creatures. This balance was to be of paramount importance with no cost too great in seeking its fulfillment. Already, I feel that this text could be used as a way to reveal what the gods' true psyche looks like. They could be higher beings who do not care about the consequences of fulfilling their goal of complete balance, as these consequences would likely not affect them in any way, shape, or form. Some evidence that they could easily use to support this claim is that our world is not the only world in Terraria's universe. While we don't know the exact amount, we at least know that the gods have created thousands of sentient worlds before ours in order to test the complexities of life in their fairness. While it doesn't need to outright say it, I believe that they could hint that such experimentation on these sentient worlds has had some hiccups along the way, which could possibly have led to an accidental creation of both the Corruption and Crimson. And I mean, just look at our world. We have the Zenith. If that doesn't scream lack of natural balance, I don't know what does. Because these worlds are living beings, they are aware of everything that goes on in their land and can feel the thoughts of every living creature. Meaning they can also sense our utter rage when we spend our entire mortgage reforging only to get the annoying prefix. With this awareness of the land, they can then utilize it to keep said balance through defensive mechanisms, 3 of these being the Corruption, Crimson, and the Hollow. But before we move on, let's actually go over 2 of these defensive mechanisms, being the Crimson and the Corruption, because I feel like there is a lot of potential to improve the story overall with them. The Corruption is a cancer born from sin, which only knows to consume everything it touches. In fact, the vile actions and thoughts present in each being feeds the growth of the Corruption, allowing it to grow more powerful and spread far worse than before. So yeah, if you're wondering why your Corruption is spreading so fast, maybe stop killing bunnies for banners so much. It's also said within the lore that after the Corruption restores balance to life, it destroys it with the goal of turning the world into a desolate abyss void of life. Now, while I like the concept of it being born from sin, I feel like we can go so much further with it compared to what they had actually written. If it truly was born from sin, why don't we have its initial creation be a result of the gods' own doing? As we stated before, the gods are not exactly epic in the methods of going about their goals. They will do whatever it takes to create a perfect balance, which could have possibly included committing cardinal sins. Over time, these sins will have clubbed together and been the true birth of this Corruption. Due to the Corruption's intention of making the land become devoid of life, I also believe this could be viewed as a wake-up call to the gods, showing them what their lack of care for those beneath them may result in when it comes to fulfilling their goals at all costs. Crimson, on the other hand, is actually a living being, focused solely on restoring balance at all costs. It's connected directly to each world it's been on, sharing a hive mind of sorts, and it's also stated that it has consumed thousands of worlds before even reaching ours. The Crimson is also a very, unsurprisingly, evil entity. This is supported within the lore, with one of its sections reading that many misguided people have conducted human sacrifices to it to placate the monstrosity or seek its favor. The Crimson gladly consumes these bodies, becoming one with them and producing terrifying beings who lose the ability to feel and blindly follow the hive mind. I find the story behind the Crimson really interesting, and it most certainly has as much potential for lore improvement as the Corruption does. I think what they could have done is represent the Crimson as a complete parallel to the gods in a way. If we look at the Crimson, it is a sentient being that seems to have the same goal of restoring balance at all costs, much like the gods. However, it is made clear that the intention of the Crimson is far more twisted in nature. I believe what they could have done is actually hint at it being one of the original gods, who could have possibly been consumed by lust for power or gluttony and morphed into what it is today, also making some sense as to why the Crimson was gladly consuming the human sacrifices. This could also then explain why it is not only a living being, but it also has the same initial intention of the other gods. Whether or not you like this viewpoint or think that I'm just clinically insane is up for you to decide, but I think this would be an interesting twist on what their true origins could be. Now I think it's about time we finally look deep into our world. You know, the thing you kind of play in, it's just, slightly important, just a little bit. The story begins with Cthulhu arriving long ago, with the sole purpose being to rain destruction on and to have dominion over all the sentient life that flourishes on our world. Just from this, I already feel like there could be so much more depth to this piece of lore. While I think it's good that Cthulhu's origins are kept unknown so that there can be a sense of mystery to the otherworldly creature, it's still strange to me why he would come to our world specifically, especially now that we know there are thousands of other worlds he could have chosen from. If they possibly added a reason for him to come here, whether it's because our world has something unique to it that could make him even more powerful than he already was, or possibly an artifact that he's come back to retrieve, at least then it would make a bit more sense. Maybe he forgot his Terra toilet or something, I don't know. It also reads in the official lore that the ancient race of Dryads waged battle against Cthulhu. While they weren't able to kill Cthulhu, they managed to cripple its abilities and rip out parts of its eyes, skeletons, and chunks of its brain, causing it to retreat to the dark side of the moon where it dwells to this day. I overall really do like this piece of lore, as it feels like a very fitting battle in the world of Terraria. But one aspect I'd change is possibly give a little more insight onto the abilities of the Dryads, or be a bit more specific as to what their combined power looked like and how it allowed them to cripple Cthulhu. Cause I mean, looking in the game, I can't exactly see the power of a Cthulhu killer in my Dryad. Moving on to the Lunatic cult, in the official lore it's stated that this cult is led by a fanatical zealot that is seeking to revive Cthulhu to its former power and bring about the end of the world. Now, while I wouldn't say this is necessarily bad storytelling, it just feels a bit generic in a way. In fact, Red previously stated in the official Terraria Discord server that the Lunatic cultists were actively attempting to prevent Cthulhu's return to the world. But that's kind of not canon anymore, so just go away. In all honesty, I think this would have been a way more fascinating way of representing the Lunatic cultist, showing the cult were struggling just to keep the power of Cthulhu sealed away, which in turn would make Cthulhu feel like an even greater threat than it already was. Obviously, the only problem with this is the fact that it would contradict the lore behind the mechanic, which states that she was forced by the cult to create the mechanical bosses as replacement body parts in order to make Cthulhu whole again. However, I believe we can actually change the story for her as well. In the official lore, it's made clear that the dungeon was actually once a thriving city before an unknown curse corrupted its people. We could possibly alter this lore by having the mechanic be one of its citizens before its eventual downfall, with her attempting to forge the mechanical bosses as her magnum opus of creation. But maybe due to an error in their systems, they went rogue and managed to escape. Then shortly after, the mechanic would be tied up and held captive by the dungeon citizens after they had succumbed to the curse. This to me just feels a bit more unique and interesting than the true story behind them, but there most certainly isn't anything wrong with the original lore. But that's about it. Before I end this video off, I want everyone to know that there isn't anything inherently wrong with the original lore behind Terraria, and I don't believe it was written by a third grader who just figured out what the difference between a noun and a verb is. I'm glad they went out of their way to provide us with some insight into the story. I just simply saw that there was some room for improvement and personally find it more interesting to look at these things this way. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys. Have an epic day, gamers.